Hello YouTube, welcome back to Kind Heart Homestead. My name is Ben and I'm here on our off-grid property in the mountains of Virginia. You know, I come up here once a week for a couple nights just to see what kind of tasks I can get done. And my priority right now, since the winter has begun, is to continue insulating and getting the drywall up. I'm not necessarily concerned about mudding and taping the drywall. I just need to get the drywall up because it's taking so much floor space out of our living area in this shed. And it also helps protect the paper backing on my fiberglass insulation bats that are in the walls and in the ceiling. The building's behind me. Got my solar panel plugged into my Anchor battery pack because that's what I use for lighting and for recharging my power tools. I mainly use M18 platform from Milwaukee Tools, and I left the pack pretty low last time because it was so dark and stormy that I wasn't able to produce any power with solar. So anyway, stick around and you'll get to watch me continue the drywall project. Thanks.
Picking up where I left off on my last trip, which you would have seen in the previous video, I went ahead and cut out the window for the north wall that I had almost finished drywalling last time. I also had to cut the hole for a plug, but now moving on to the rest of the 12-foot panels on the ceiling. But before I can put up that last 12-foot panel, I have to finish the insulation on those last few feet of the remaining bays. You can see here I'm doing my 2 layers of R19 insulation. The top one is the roll that I have to cut into 20-foot lengths to span the length of the building perpendicular to the joists. And then under that, I'm stapling the large fiberglass bats with the paper on them. The paper allows me to secure them to the wood pretty easily and keeps everything out of the way for the drywall. But the only tricky part of this is trying to hold everything up into place with my head while I secure them with staples. I think if you had hired someone to do jobs like this, you would have different teams from different trades coming in and knocking out their entire expertise before the next team comes in. So you would typically have the electrician knocking out all of the rough-in wiring. Then you would have the insulators coming in, filling up all of the bays. Before you finally have the drywallers coming in, hanging up the board, and then the tapers who do the tape and mudding to start the finishing process for the drywall. But for me, because I'm not a professional and because I don't have a lot of room in here to work, I'm essentially forced to just work one part of the room at a time. Obviously, I don't want to start mudding and taping until I get to that point, but for now, I'm filling up stud bays and putting the drywall over them to protect the insulation from any sort of damage, especially because it has this paper backing on it that I'm using to staple. If I was to puncture that with a tool, or if I'm rolling my scaffolding around or the drywall lift and it snags, I could easily pull that paper off, or even worse, pull the insulation out of the bay. So you can see here, I'm moving on now that I have the insulation secured. I'm cutting this last 12-foot sheet of drywall for the ceiling just a bit skinnier because it's a 12-foot building on the outside, but it's closer to 11 feet on the inside. So I cut about a foot off, and now I'm lifting it into place to secure it with drywall screws, starting on one side and then moving my way to the other side. Even with two people, I don't think I could move these 12-foot sheets to the appropriate place on the ceiling without this drywall lift. But I'm definitely doing all of this by myself, and I have to have this lift to get things up to the ceiling. The walls are a different story. I can place blocks onto the walls, just around the area that the bottom of a drywall sheet would sit on, but I don't really have that option for the ceiling. The 12-foot sheets are too long to where if I lifted them up on one central point, it would potentially break. So I need to have it supported on both ends, and I don't have anything I could do that with other than this lift. So I got this lift secondhand, brought it up from South Carolina. Uh, I would say it's equivalent to what Harbor Freight offers. I don't know if it's the exact same one that they sell or not, but it is working well for this task, and I'm sure I will need it again once I need to drywall the actual house. And then this Milwaukee drywall gun is definitely a lot easier than using my impact driver or a drill. I am starting to get the hang of this. I just keep some drywall screws in my back pocket and move them one at a time. I'm working my way from the top down with drywall because each subsequent sheet moving down supports the one above. So the next drywall sheet I need to add will be the top one that supports the ceiling. But before I do that, I need to get my diatomaceous earth sprinkled down onto the bottom plate to keep bugs out of there. And then I'll move on to insulating those walls because obviously I won't be able to get the insulation into the stud bays after the drywall is up. So now is my only time to do it. The easiest stud bays to insulate are the ones that have no obstructions whatsoever, such as plumbing lines, electrical wires, or windows. So the first two bays here are the easiest, and my insulation bats are 93 inches tall, because with 8-foot ceilings, your stud bay would be 93 inches tall. So I work my way from the top down because I need to staple the paper to the studs, and that's the only way to keep the fiberglass flush with the top plate. If it was to sag, then that would create an uninsulated thermal area where your heat would be able to escape from the building pretty easily. So I try to keep it as flush as possible, but as I move my way down, I do encounter electrical wires and electrical boxes. For the box, I just cut out a little square from the paper and from the fiberglass behind the paper using some kitchen shears that I purchased at Sam's Club. They were pretty affordable and I like them because they're sharp. But when I encounter a wire, like you can see here, there's a wire going across approximately 18 inches from the floor. All I have to do is peel the back part of the insulation from the front part and slide the back part behind. And then they essentially sandwich the cable and the two pieces of fiberglass meet back together. So I went ahead and cut this piece of drywall to length. I pretty much only had to cut 6 inches off of the end. And what I was shooting for is this double stud here with the jack stud and the king stud. I wanted the joint of the drywall to fall there. And it's a very convenient spot because I only had to cut off a few inches. But you can see I fastened these blocks. This is the only way I can figure out how to do drywall by myself. I'm not sure if you know this, but typically drywallers put the ceiling in first, and then they butt their upper wall panel to the ceiling. And that essentially holds up the ceiling drywall. And I'm sure I put enough screws in up there, but I'm just trying to do the process by the book, and whatever the standard protocol is, I'm trying to do that. Anyway, I have a block here, a block towards the other end. I'm going to lift this piece of drywall up, and hopefully I put these blocks in the right spot. I did measure 4 feet down, and then I added an eighth to give me enough room to wiggle the drywall around. So anyway, let's see if it works.
I just started a couple drywall screws because I do need to lift this that extra eighth of an inch. And once I lift that, I'm only going to have one hand. And I can only figure out how to use this with two hands. So one to hold the screw and one to use the gun. So if I get the screw started, I should be able to finish it off the rest of the way. So now that I have this sheet tacked into place, the next thing I like to do is trace a level line from the screws across from the bottom to the top of the sheet. And I can't reach all the way, but that's fine because the top row of screws are going to screw into the double top plate. So those don't need that inch and a half of width to really lock into the center of the stud. They can go anywhere. And I suppose if I had a laser level that can project vertically, I could line it up to each. But by the time I've bent down and moved that level so many times, I might as well have just traced lines. This isn't that slow. So take a look.
I like to trace these lines with only one of the two drywall boards installed, and that's because I like to see, or at least feel, the center of the stud and align my level with the center, just in case that screw that I put in was slightly off.
That's all it takes. Now I'm going to knock out the rest of these screws.
I follow most of the same practices that I did for the top sheet for this bottom sheet, except I like to get the screws started. That way I only need one hand on the screw gun, and I use my levels as a shim to hold them up high enough off the floor to butt close enough to the upper sheet to where it's not going to take too much mud to fill between them when the time comes to mud and tape this. And after that, I'm just cutting out the openings for the electrical boxes or any other penetrations there might be before I finish the screws. That's it for the drywall content of this video. I need to move on to some chores that I've been putting off for far too long involving our chickens. So I hope you can sit back and enjoy this content where I move our chicken coop and our chickens up the hill to a sunnier part of our property. For several months, our chicken coop has been down near our neighbor's property so they could help look after our chickens when we're away. But for the past few months, I've been going up to our property in Virginia at least once a week, which allows me plenty of opportunity to observe our chickens, make sure they're secure and fed and watered, things like that, collect the eggs. And this time of year, they're not really producing that many eggs anyway. But now that it's winter, the chickens are in the dark a lot more than they used to be. So I want to get their chicken coop up into the sun, and I'm hoping that the sun helps keep their water bowl thawed, whereas it's been pretty much frozen every time I come up when it's down here in the shade. So you can see that I was able to pull the coop up the hill with the truck. I have a trailer hitch on it now for tasks kind of like these, but it's already on a plastic pallet, which acts pretty much as a sled for me to pull it up. You'll see in a few minutes that the hardest part about this entire process was actually trying to catch the chickens and move them up. I essentially had to chase them through the woods up here to where I'm rebuilding their chicken run. But the chicken run doesn't necessarily keep predators out, but it keeps the chickens in. And the chickens can go inside anytime they want during the day. We have an automatic chicken door that opens when the sun comes up and closes when the sun goes down. If a bear wants to get in here, it certainly can. We've had bears come in before. I haven't caught any footage on our wildlife cam yet, but I bought the wildlife cam after two bear attacks that we had on the coop, but our chickens were fine. All that I had to do was kind of readjust our chicken run fencing and fix the silo. But in general, I come up and refill the silo every time I visit Virginia. And every month or so, I have to buy new feed because the possums and the raccoons tend to eat it around midnight. Every night, they come out and they just come in, drink water, eat all the chicken's food. And this place has the added benefit of the chickens being able to forage on the grass, where at their last place, they were there so long that there wasn't any grass left. I mentioned the automatic chicken coop door a minute ago. This is from a company called Ladies First. I believe it was manufactured in North Carolina. We've had this for a few years with good results, but now is the time to replace the rechargeable batteries because with the reduced amount of light and the cold conditions, I'm worried about the batteries not responding and thus locking the chickens into the coop all day. So with fresh batteries, and now that this door is facing the sun, I should be able to keep everything warm enough and functional enough for at least this winter to make sure nothing hinders the opening and closing of this door. It does open and close based on the amount of light that it senses. So it's important to at least have it facing somewhere that does get lit with the sun. So this is facing the east, so it's going to immediately open with the first light that it encounters. And now that it's up farther on the hill away from the woods, I'm hoping that it extends the amount of time uh, during the day that it remains open as well. Even though the chickens seem to have their own clock, they'll go inside before it gets too dark. Not necessarily the same timing that this door has. But you can see here, the door opens and closes fairly slowly and it's a bit noisy, but our chickens are used to it. This utilizes a threaded rod spinning around to make sure the door goes all the way up and all the way down and that no predators could potentially open it to get in. I got out a square-shaped shovel to get all of this chicken poop and old wood chips out. We use pine shavings from Tractor Supply, and I have plenty of the unused brand new chips to throw in. So I'm just trying to scrape as much of this out as possible because we're long overdue for cleaning this out. It's a bit unsanitary, but with only three chickens, it's not a huge concern. We haven't had any pest infestations or anything like that, so we're pretty thankful. But now I need to get the chickens up here so they can enjoy their new location.
Lead the way, chickens. We're almost there. Go ahead, chickens. All right, just filled up the chickens' food bins, got the silo set up, got their water. The only thing I'm not really comfortable leaving them without is reserve water in the rain barrel, but I can't do anything about that. When it rains, it's gonna drain off the roof, fill up that blue barrel, but I do have their bucket filled, so that should be fine for the next week. I just need to make sure that the chickens know how to navigate this before I leave. I'm also not planning to put the bird netting over the top. I'm not sure if that's a mistake. I haven't noticed any predators coming in that way, but our chickens can fly. So as long as they don't fly out, it should be fine. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode of Kind Heart Homestead. I know this is a bit different than usual, but I'm trying to get back to the homesteading tasks, not just construction. So let me know if there's any kind of homesteading tasks or construction tasks you'd like to see, and I'll see if I can record something for a future video. Thanks.